It's the 18th of October, 1990. A husband and wife have pulled over on the side of the Western Highway just outside the small Victorian town of Kaniva. They are not there because of an accident or anything suspicious. They've simply stopped to collect gum nuts. But within moments, everything changes. The wife notices something laying in the grass. At first, it's hard to make out, but as she gets closer, she realizes it's a body of a young girl lying face down in the scrub. She's only a short distance from a truck stop used by drivers traveling between Adelaide and Melbourne. Police rush to the scene, then about 50 meters away, they make another horrifying discovery. A second body, a teenage boy. Both have been stabbed. Both have been dead for only a short time. The victims were 15-year-old Fiona Burns and 14-year-old John Lee. 35 years later, despite one of Victoria's most shocking double murders, no one has ever been held accountable. So what happened to Fiona and John, and who got away with killing two teenagers on a lonely stretch of highway? Hi everyone, and thank you so much for clicking on today's video. If you are new here, my name is Ebony Rose, and on this channel, I mainly cover Australian true crime, missing persons cases, and unsolved mysteries with the goal of helping keep these stories and the people at the center of them from being forgotten. If you enjoy this video or support what I am trying to do, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, leave a kind comment, and subscribe to the channel. Every interaction helps these cases reach more people, which means more awareness, and sometimes that's exactly what's needed to help keep these cases alive. Now, let's get into today's case. Before we get into what happened to Fiona and John, I want to take a minute to talk about who they were, because when this case was reported back in 1990, so much of the focus was on how they died, not who they were as people. And they were misconstrued to be street teens in the media, which they weren't. Fiona Burns was 15 years old and from Langwarrin in Melbourne's southeast. Her parents had just gone through a divorce and she was currently living at an aunt's house. She'd lived with her mum and moved out of her mum's house, and then she moved in with her dad. Still wasn't happy there, and so she then moved in with her aunt. Now, I know when people hear that she was moving between family members, they sometimes jump to conclusions. But the thing is, her parents had separated. She was a child. It's extremely upsetting for kids to go through that. I mean, it's her family. Her younger sister, Barbie, who was just 12 at the time, has said Fiona was really struggling with her parents' divorce. She just couldn't seem to find where she felt settled. That doesn't make her a troubled teenager like the media back then portrayed her as. By all accounts, Fiona was actually pretty quiet. She was intelligent, loved science, and wasn't the type of kid anyone would have looked at and thought, she's at risk. But for reasons her family still doesn't fully understand, Fiona did start running away, hitchhiking, and traveling to Adelaide. She made the trip at least 3 times that year, hitchhiking each time. Now, I know hearing that today sounds incredibly dangerous, but you have to remember it was 1990. Hitchhiking wasn't seen the way it is now. People still did it, especially young people. It was during one of those trips that she met John Lee. John was just 14 years old and living in a group home in Adelaide. We actually know very little about his life before that. His family stayed almost completely out of the media, which is incredibly sad to think about. And even after his murder, very little was written about him. And honestly, it's just so sad because he was just a 14-year-old boy, a kid who deserved to be remembered for more than the way his life ended. Fiona and John became friends, and by all accounts, they were very close. Before leaving Adelaide for what would become her final journey, Fiona called her dad, and this was 2 weeks before what happened to her. His name is John Burns, and she told him she had a surprise for him when she got home. Her family has always believed that surprise was John, that she was bringing him back to Melbourne so he could finally meet them. So they are going to be a little bit confusing. You've got John Burns and John Lee. So John Burns is the dad of Fiona, and John Lee is her friend that she's found with. So let's talk about the last time anyone saw Fiona and John alive. Between the 9th and the 11th of October 1990, there were several confirmed sightings of the pair hitchhiking along the Western Highway, making their way from Adelaide towards Melbourne. Fiona was pretty easy to recognize. She had a bright orange mohawk, so people remembered seeing her. A number of drivers and people passing through the area later told police they'd seen the teenagers, including one sighting of them stopping at a shop in Bordertown. So Bordertown is the town sitting on the border of Adelaide and Victoria. One of the most important sightings happened on the night of the 10th of October, sometime between 10 o'clock and midnight. Fiona reportedly knocked on the window of a parked truck and woke the driver up. She asked the driver if she could have a cigarette and whether he'd be willing to give them a lift towards Melbourne. Said no. I mean, he might not have even been going in that direction. We don't know. But after Fiona and John's bodies were found, he came forward to police. And based on the timeline, investigators believe that he may have been one of the last people, if not the last person, to see Fiona alive. Another witness also reported seeing Fiona standing beside the open passenger door of a different truck, talking to a driver. On the 11th of October, a canvas bag along with several of Fiona's belongings were also found on the Western Highway. It was just over 10 kilometers or 6 miles from the truck stop where Fiona and John would later be discovered. After that, the trail goes completely cold. There's no confirmed sightings. There's no contact made between Fiona and anyone. There's just nothing. About a week after she'd last heard from her daughter, Fiona's mum, Linda, reported her missing. Fiona usually kept in touch, so the silence wasn't like her. Then another week passed, and on the 18th of October, the couple made the gruesome discovery. By the time Fiona and John Lee's bodies were discovered, they had been exposed to the elements for close to 2 weeks, making it incredibly difficult for investigators to recover evidence. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, nothing to suggest the murders had actually taken place where they were found, and there'd been very little effort to hide the bodies. They'd just simply been left off the Western Highway. Because of that, police have long believed the pair were killed somewhere else, possibly inside the vehicle of the person who picked them up, or maybe at another location entirely, and then driven out to that isolated stretch of road and dumped. The postmortem examinations revealed Fiona had suffered multiple stab wounds, while John had just died from a single stab wound to the chest, which is really bizarre. And here's where the case becomes even more confusing. Neither teenager had anything particularly valuable on them, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. So almost straight away, detectives ruled out robbery as a motive, which really didn't leave them with much. The truck stop where the bodies were found was used by long-haul drivers traveling between Adelaide and Melbourne. So, whoever was responsible could have come from almost anywhere and just kept driving once the attack was over. In those first few weeks, police threw everything they had into that investigation, but unfortunately, the case just goes cold. And then the detectives were demanded elsewhere, and with so little forensic evidence available, this case just slowly began to lose momentum. Weeks turned into months, months turned into years. Over the years, police have looked into a number of different theories. One name that came up was the serial killer Ivan Milat. At the time, Ivan Milat was known to travel that part of the country, so investigators looked into whether he could have been responsible. But the theory didn't fit. The way Fiona and John's bodies were left was very different from Milat's known crimes, and he was eventually ruled out. Another theory that started circulating claimed Fiona had links to a satanic cult. Her family has always rejected that idea. They've said it came from sensationalized media coverage at the time rather than any actual evidence. And honestly, there's nothing that's ever backed that claim up. Media just used a soundbite. Police have also suggested the murders may have been an opportunistic attack, maybe even what they described as a thrill killing. But the truth is, nobody knows. No suspect has ever been publicly identified. No one has ever been arrested, and no one has ever been charged. What detectives have said consistently over the last 3 decades is that they believe someone somewhere knows exactly what happened. Maybe it's the person responsible, maybe it's someone they confided in afterwards. Either way, police believe the answers are still out there. The closest this case has ever come to a breakthrough was in 2011. An anonymous caller contacted police with information about a vehicle they believed was connected to the murders. At the time, Detective Inspector John Potter described it as the most significant lead investigators had received in more than 20 years. Police publicly pleaded for that caller to come forward again and even raised the possibility of immunity through the Office of Public Prosecutions if it helped solve the case. But the caller never contacted them again, and the vehicle was never identified. Then in 2017, Victorian police announced a $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of whoever murdered Fiona and John. 35 years later, that reward remains unclaimed. The case has still been featured on the Australian True Crime podcast and Channel 7's $1 Million Cold Case in 2021. Victorian police also launched a dedicated cold case website to keep cases like Fiona and John's in the public eye and encourage anyone with information to finally come forward. And despite all these years, investigators still believe this case can be solved. So this is the part of the story that has really stuck with me because it wasn't just Fiona and John whose lives were changed forever. Their families have been living with the aftermath for the last 36 years. Fiona's younger sister Barbie was only 12 years old when Fiona was murdered. When she went back to school, there was no counseling, no support, and no one checking to see how she was coping. Instead, she hid at the library at lunchtime because she was being bullied over her own sister's murder. A lot of that came from the way this case was reported on. Back in the 1990s, there was real moral panic around teenagers and supposed satanic cults, and somehow Fiona and John's case got swept up into it. Some newspapers published claims about satanic rituals, despite there being no evidence to support them. One report even pointed to a Buffy the Vampire Slayer book found among Fiona's belongings, as if that somehow proved she was involved in the occult. But think about that for a second. Reading a vampire book doesn't make someone part of a cult. Those stories weren't based on evidence. They were based on rumors and sensationalism. Fiona's family has always rejected those claims. They remember her as a quiet, caring teenager who loved animals. She grew up with 7 cats and even nicknamed herself Fifi after them. That's who Fiona was, not the version created by sensational headlines. And I think that's important because once Fiona and John were labeled street kids, it changed the way people saw them. But they weren't just street kids. They were 15 and 14 years old. They were children. Barbie has said that label made her feel like people cared less about finding whoever was responsible. Whether that's true or not, that's how it felt to the family, and that's just heartbreaking. The murders didn't just take Fiona and John, they changed their families forever. Barbie has spoken about the guilt, the grief, and how the close-knit family they once had slowly drifted apart. The adults carried the weight of what happened while the children were left to cope on their own. Decades later, they're still waiting for answers. And they're still waiting for justice. 36 years later, the murders of Fiona Burns and John Lee remain unsolved. Victoria police still consider this an active cold case, and there's still a $1 million reward for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of the person or people responsible. If you know anything about what happened, no matter how small it might seem, or even if you've never told anyone before, now is the time to come forward. You can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 1800 333 000 or make a report online through crimestoppers.com.au. Fiona was just 15 years old, John was only 14. They should have had their whole lives ahead of them. Instead, someone took that away. If this case has stayed with you, please consider sharing this video. The right person might see it, remember something, or finally decide it's time to speak. Someone knows what happened to Fiona Burns and John Lee. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for spending this time with me remembering Fiona and John, helping to keep their story alive. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you could give it a thumbs up, leave a kind comment, and subscribe to join our community. Every like, comment, and sharing helps bring more awareness to these cases and gives them the chance to reach someone who might know something. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.